I have the pleasure of introducing you as Sindhi. We're talking Indus civilization. Indus civilization is called Sindh, and we have a Sindhi. The Sindhi man came from India to this country after retired from the Indian Navy. And I met him in 1986 or 7 or 4, and a utterly nationalistic Indian, a poet. He has become old now, but he lives his life in the same style that he was when he was back in home. And what I have requested him, that he will give you a short presentation on Sindh as seen by a Sindhi. So he will be taught. So please welcome Dr. Niranjan Dudhani.
Thank you very much. I was born 25 kilometers from Mohenjo-daro, and I visited Mohenjo-daro often since childhood. The last one was in 1984. And I have few hypotheses on the subject of Mohenjo-daro and the Sindhu civilization, which are, my first one is the question of deciphering the script. I'm not surprised, but I'm disappointed that none of the research people have tried to correlate these symbols with the Sindhi language. Now, Sindhi language has 52 alphabets. Professor Anne-Marie Schimmel wrote that 40 of these are related to Sanskrit and other Indian languages, and 12 out of 12, there are 7 from Arabic and 5 from Farsi. Now, the 40 letters of alphabet, there are 6 alphabets which are very typical to Sindhi, which are not common in other Indian languages. I am not aware of it. These are pronounced B, like a goat is called bakri, and frog is called dader, and there's a bird gero, and there's a bird gamu, and there's a so these alphabet B, B, D, G, D, Ny, Ng. These are typical to Sindhi, and therefore, if you start, for example, you saw the steel symbol with showing a goat with a bucket. Now, goat will be bakri, and a bucket will be dole in Sindhi. And I think if these people who try to decipher it sit down with any expert who's on Sindhi language, may be able to decipher some of the words and get along. We Sindhis we are simple people, and we try to have a simple solution to complex problems. So if the deciphering people sit down with a Sindhi expert in Sindhi language, you will say one can learn Sindhi language, but these pronunciations which I gave to you cannot be learned as an adult. You have to start from the babyhood. And therefore, my suggestion to Jaspal Singh and the other people who decipher it, try and do it from a Sindhi point of view. With a Sindhi expert in Sindhi language, maybe you will be able to get somewhere. Now, other hypothesis I have, there's a symbol of swastika from Mohenjo-daro, which opens on both sides, left side or the right side, or east or west. My feeling is it was an export-oriented society with the settlements all along the Persian Gulf, and they had boats and ocean-going boats which used to take exports to the east as well as the west. The swastika which opens on the west will probably tied to the goods which are being exported to the West. And swastika with opening to the East were tied to the goods which are exported to the East. And it's the simplest solution, and no mixing up will occur. And it was a peaceful society. Like the Sindhis are peaceful but passive, unfortunately, and there have been no weapons of war unearthed at Harappa or Mohenjo-daro. And that is another thing. And also Sindhis who are here or in India believe in multiple gods. So in the museum at Mohenjo-daro, there's symbols of monkey god, there's multiple symbols of mother goddess, and there is a sizable Shivlingam with the yoni in the museum. Now, in Sindh at present, they don't label it as a Shiva symbol and other things, but we know from the symbols which have been, the seals which have been excavated, there is a posture of Pashupati, who's called Pashupati. So the Shiva, Lingam, Mother Goddess, monkey gods, these were worshipped just like the Sindhi Hindus do it even nowadays. And then my other hypothesis is about the worship. How many of you have been to Vaishnu Devi Tirth? Okay. About 6 years back, myself and wife, we went to Vaishnu Devi, and we were struck by the pindis, which represent Mahakali, Mahalakshmi, and Mahasaraswati. These pindis, to me, and the structure and the shape and the size looked very similar to what Sir John Marshall has printed in his book, Indus, which shows the size. These are small ones. So my hypothesis is, after the floods, 3 pindis were taken by the bearers up the Indus River towards the mountain to find a safe refuge. They went along the west bank of Indus because east was all the mighty 5 flowing rivers of Punjab. And they went further up in Jammu area. They came to Katra River. Katra River is the only river which flows from west to east, unlike other 5 rivers which flow from east to west. And by the time they reached there, it was a dried bed, and they were walking with the 3 holy pindis, and lo and behold, they came to the Trikut Mountains, the 3 peaks, the only 3 peaks, hills in that region, and that was a divine signal to them that this is the place. And so they went up and they searched for a safe place or safe refuge. And it was probably, by the time it was winter, and the legend of Vaishnu Devi says that Mata Rani rested at the Garbhajuni, which was a shallow cave where the Mata Rani is supposed to have rested for 8 to 9 or 10 months and then went into the final abode. So they came up the hill, the Trakut mountain. They took refuge, found a refuge for these pindis in Garbhajuni, and then when the weather improved, they went and installed it in this place. So these are my hypotheses. I may be wrong, I may be right, I don't know, but I think there is a simplest solution. It shows the continuity of the Indus Valley civilization or Sindhu civilization with present day India. And that's all. I had slides, but half the slides you have already seen it. So if you have anything else, I would only give you the words for some of those difficult Sindhi alphabet. Birds, bakri, birds, and bird, ostrich is called bagupaki, and and the bubble tree is called bubble, or purse is called battoon, and day is the sickle is called datro, as I told you, and there is the dates in one type of coconut of the kaju tree in Sindh is a hard, not soft like the date. So it's called, in Sindhi, it's called doko, which is hard but as sweet as anything else. And also the molar is called data, and the bull is called dand as well as dhago. So these are the words which are very, and here leg is called yang in Sindhi. And there's a special bird in Sindh which is only found in Sindh. It is called gamu. And nya is used manya, sunya, unya, which is thirst, bayaban, sunya, and runya. Runya is mirage. And nga is a single. The horn, bull's horn is any horn. If you find in the seal, it's called single. So that's all. And if you have any questions,
Thank you.
Thank you.
In the seals, when you look at the decipher of the writings, is there any suggestion by the repeats that this could have been a musical, some kind of music written? Because again, as you mentioned, that bills of sales and stuff would be common, but the other way we commonly write to convey to other people is music or expression of ourselves, even if we don't want to call it music, which would have to be repetitious in that case.
Well, what we know is the following, that from all evidence is the writing is from right to left in most of the seals. But in some of the seal, it again is from left to the right. As far as music, I don't know, like for large part, Indian music is still not written. So I do not know if they were writing music at that time.
You said that it could be many languages, or it could be one language, but there's the possibility that it could be many scripts, that the 417 symbols come from 5 different scripts. Is there any way to make out if that is possible?
Well, the computer analysis that has been done by TIFR and other people of, see, these 417 symbols come out of 8,000 seals that they analyze, and these are the symbols that keep repeating themselves.
But do they fall into groups? So, I mean, is there enough data to show that there is actually one script as opposed to?
Well, this is what the paper from TIFR suggests.
I read the paper, I don't think it's. Anyway, that's a different question.
No, this is what it says, that is the logic that they are going with, that they are phrases that are internally consistent with the entropy of the
I'll talk to you later then.
Okay.
The paper doesn't say that.
Okay.
No, I think what the papers say is that as the string elongates, so they will pick up characters. So what they think that as the trade goes on, expand further, so they are picking up new symbols. So that may be local symbol, Mesopotamian symbol back here. So whether the script adopt the symbols, so that could be a question. But that is where they're trying to find that as the Harappan thing moves, that's what the trade is, and new symbols are being incorporated. So the question is whether a language has the symbols, and symbols come from many different directions, the language may not change. So that's the idea they're presenting.
No, I think that's a different problem. The basic signs and symbols of script, they are consistent according to the analysis.
Any other question, yeah?
Since the Eastern languages from Sanskrit and the Western languages from Latin have a lot of commonalities, and if the tablets are showing common features of Aryan and Dravidian, both the features, then it would appear that all the languages originated over there in the East rather than in the West. I'm just deducing from your presentation.
Well, that is one view. One view is that almost all these languages originated what is called Jharkhand nowadays. But this is just a view.
But that makes us very proud.
On that note, I think that...
No, wait 1 second. I think since we have few extra minutes by 12:30, what I'm suggesting is we will go to the Sindh presentation after the lunch. So if you have any burning questions for Richard and for the 3 presenters we have in the morning, if you think something interesting that people can share, or you can share with people, observations, otherwise, you can feel free to present it in the microphone there. On the dance culture, song, music, and geography, rainfall, climate.
Can Richard stress
Please go to the microphone and let's have a lively discussion. Okay. I'll give you the microphone.
Just like to know from Richard the feeling he had, if I understand right, that you identified the statue or the figurine of the woman, and it is such a major development in that whole civilization. Can you share with us the feeling of pleasure or what you really felt when you first time saw this statuette? Because I think that would be, to me, that would be a major enlightenment as to what was your inner feeling at that time? I mean, you were an archaeologist for a while, and having that statue in your hand.
We have copied what John Marshall did in 1922.
Yes.
I think so. So such an impression is probably universal. But anything specific like the material, structure, aspect ratio, and anything that you think what the stuff is, more technical, you can probably indulge in. You know, okay, all right. Binod.
I'm Vinod Mishra. The question I have is from Richard, and I try to interrupt, and apologize for that. There is a recent mention of a study by Professor Sarkar of IIT Kharagpur, another Indian Archaeological Institute professor, and several other authorities who have tried to establish in the new dating system that Indus Valley civilization is perhaps 3,000 years older than what was perceived so far. So I just wanted to see his, listen from him, because he is very knowledgeable.
Good point.
That how he looks at that study and what are the implications does it changes to his presentation. Thank you.
The study by Sarkar et al., which I believe is the one you're talking about,
Yes.
Unfortunately has a number of aspects to it which include errors in both in interpretation and in procedure. One situation which is very technical, and that is that radiocarbon dates basically as they come out of the machines which are used to read them, to figure out how much decay there's been in the radioactive carbon, basically are affected by cosmic rays in the atmosphere, and as a result have to be calibrated in order to come down to calendar years. The calibrations are based on a particular half-life of decay of the radiocarbon. The original half-life of decay of radiocarbon was the one created by Willard Libby in 1952, and it is an age which is actually younger or a less period of time than one which has been calculated since then. But, and so normally speaking, laboratories today would normally, if you were to use the more accurate half-life, would basically use that and report that as the basis for their presentation of the date. However, most labs in the world basically have decided, because in order to include all dates, including the ones which use the older half-life, to report everything in the older half-life, the original Libby half-life, and then use that half-life for doing the calibration. It really makes no difference which half-life you're reporting in as long as you're consistent. The problem is that there are some labs which still use what's called the more accurate or the newer half-life and report that. However, all calibration programs, algorithms, require the use of the old half-life. Unfortunately, if you don't know that, you use the new half-life and plug it into these computer programs, basically you come out with a wrong date. And in that article, the dates they cite are wrong because they used the wrong half-life to calibrate, to do the calibration.
So, but Richard, all respect to you, how did you conclude that? It was not in the article.
If you look in the article, it says specifically they used a 5730 half-life. You can't use a 5730 half-life to calibrate. You have to use a 5568 half-life to calibrate. So there was a mistake right there.
I think what the...
And another aspect of this is that, again, I told you that you have to be extremely careful about your use of radiocarbon dates. For radiocarbon dates from a site like this, especially dates which seem to be new, creating a completely new picture, require a higher level of proof than basically something which fits the current pattern. Therefore, in order to go forward with this, and I'm perfectly willing to entertain this situation, you need to go back to the site and get a lot of new dates in order to basically figure out what actually is going on. Because we have no idea what sort of bioturbation or other sorts of things may have happened to the radiocarbon dates which they originally got. As far as the OSR dates, as far as the dates on the ceramic pieces themselves, that sort of dating is basically sometimes works, sometimes doesn't work. Again, 2 dates on 2 pieces of pottery don't give you an accurate information. You have to have a lot more dates in order to accept them. You just cannot accept a date because it exists on paper. You have to basically, especially for situations where you have a complete change in the paradigm, you have a lot more work you have to do to basically prove that in fact what you have is consistent with many samples.
Okay, I just want to say certain things. The dates that we'll hear today and the dates that we'll hear in the subsequent conferences we plan to do, they're all estimates. Indian dates are not known. I did not know my own birth date. And people say it is wrong. Question then is that Indians never really cared, they never really tried to see a record that this happened then. Why is a cultural inquiry. So whether time is cyclic, time will come. So when it comes to this particular thing, radioactive, radio dating, radiocarbon dating, the part of our IDC, India Discovery Center, hopefully is to encourage our children, future people, technologists, to discover new techniques, interdisciplinary techniques. It is not the same old the radioactivity techniques. There could be more imaging techniques to decipher out. So that has not happened. But I think if you have people, young students, anywhere, if you can encourage them, that this also a challenging science. Physicians, engineering are good, but this also challenging, interesting. This could also have new insight, so that will be more useful. So that's the message for India Discovery. So I want to share that. because dates will come, all dates will be questioned. We had a lecture last April or March, and Akluskar came from Canada, and he said Asoka's dates are wrong. 500 before. Some people say Buddha was born 1900 BC. Done. So the question then is, who wrote this history? Lately I discovered many of the things that we learn in history may be wrong. So the question is, we have to go and unravel them and see them. So I think feel blessed that we're in this room talking about it. India is so impoverished. People are so oppressed that they didn't have time to be looked back. It's okay. My name is this. But your name has a color. Your name has a heritage. Your name has a history. You know what I mean? So let's see that history we know. You know what I mean? It's a privilege. Not for us. I tell you again, personally, this came to me very intensely when I became a grandfather. The little girl staring at me. Who is she? She calls herself Mishra. Shalini Mishra. All right, is there another name? It is a part of that dancer you saw. And she's a dancer. Has become a dancer. So anyway, so those are discoveries I wanted to champion. Dudhani sir.
Sir Morton, Sir Peter, after the excavation in 30s and 40s, said that Mohenjo-daro are actually 3 cities on top of each other. Every 250 to 300 years, the city got flooded and they didn't rebuild, they rebuilt it on top of the sunken walls. And the exploration has not been completed of the top city yet because of high subsoil water.
Last question, okay.
The Indus cities, those especially which are in floodplains, have a very complicated history of rebuilding through time. I don't think we can divide it into 1, 2, or 3 different, it's a continuous situation of rebuilding. And they kept building up on top of the remains of the older cities. This may have been affected by floods at one time or another as one aspect of what may happen, but if you think the lifetime of these buildings also is relatively short anyway, especially in an area like that which has a lot of salt in the clay, which we used to make the bricks, which then caused the walls to start decaying. This is certainly a problem today at those sites as well. And we have to, when we conserve those, we have to deal with that issue. And you all know about the situation of this at Mohenjo-daro. So that the interesting thing about this is that over time, people kept building on top of each other, top of the ruins of their ancestors. And they moved around the localities that they lived in. And sometimes when an area was abandoned, it was usually a garbage dump. And then basically people knocked down some of the walls, used what was left of the other walls as foundations for the next level. And that's a very common situation at these sites, and it continues to be a common situation even today in, for example, at the modern town of Harappa, where we have very nice examples of this taking place even today. But the main thing was in these areas which got flooded was to basically keep yourself raised above the areas which were flooded. And what happens with flooding, of course, is you have deposition of silt, and therefore actually the landscape rises also. And so you have to keep ahead of the rise of the landscape in order to keep out of the floods.
Okay. Can we all thank
I have a question about the trade routes. You mentioned about Indus civilization may have some trade behavior with Mesopotamia. The question is that if the trade route is along the Indus River, it makes sense because the river supported, but you will have the north to the west side, the west and east side trade route. That means that you need to have some kind of logistics, just like medieval time, the Silk Road is an oasis in between, or you have some kind of village in between. But back into that earliest time, and it rarely has any village in between the Mesopotamian civilization and Indus civilization area. So how does that logistic can sustain the trade? That's the question.
It could be like a mix of water and the on-ground transportation. So they took advantage of river and then on ground and then reach the things to the port, and from there they use the ship. So it could be a combination of both.
How about the food? The water, maybe you can say that from some kind of river or somewhere, but the food for that long, the journey is too long. So my question, how do you carry at least a couple months, right? It's not just a week or days.
Yeah, so Rich, can you help, can you add anything on this one? The question is, how it maybe reaching to the, port, because they're not, connected the river to reaching there.
Reaching where?
The sea road.
Well, I mean, as you said, I think that there was a combination of river transport, overland transport, and then marine transport, basically, and there would be marine, so ocean transport, basically.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Barbara, and I wanted to say I came from Hawaii, not just for this though. My question's also about trade, a follow-up of the land. We went along one of the silk routes last year, and one of the interesting things is horses. You know, the Chinese horses, or when they got to the high plains where they had the stronger horses. I wondered if you'd come across any, were horses used for transporting? I presume camels weren't in that area. Has there been any findings on that?
So far, what I learned, is pretty much they use either bullock and some other, the horses were not, really, found. So maybe it could be, because particularly in Rajasthan, other states, they use, camels, in desert area. But in the bullock, that bullock cart, that was, major, but the horses were not, really found any evidence.
Okay, thank you.
Done. Well, last question going.
I have a comment. There's something called the onagar, which is a South Asian wild ass, which is in fact used and was used for transportation along with the bull, and not the camel. The second point is about the transportation route that you showed that goes from Shortugai down through Afghanistan to the west. That wasn't developed till about 800 BC, 1,000 years later. And when Cyrus the Great attacked India, and he came across that, he had a difficult time coming across because there were very few oases. They had to be discovered. And in fact, it's a major issue of establishing that part of the route. So those are just 2 points.
No, those may be correct, because these are maps, so whatever they put together is a lot more information they collected, and there may be a possibility of error on those.
Yeah.
So definitely your points are well taken.
In fact, the Shortugai, I believe they used to bring it down the Indus and ship it through the Indus Valley civilization.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Good. Thank you.
All right, so we managed the 6. So would you thank Sajid, my friend, for bringing all the stuff here, and also thank our speakers, 6 of them. So we have 2 more things to do. One is I will present to you a gentleman who grew up in Sindh like Dr. Dudhani. And then I think one thing you notice through this presentation is that some of these people, somehow, whatever resources they had, they knew how to be industrious. They knew how to multiply, how to be prosperous, how to trade, how to sell their goods in faraway lands. So that seems to be a trait in Sindh. The Sindhis are businessmen. They're small businessmen. They're self-contained. They try to create resources from their limited resources. So this thing will be championed by our next person who grew up there. And once he is done, what I'll ask you is, we'll take a 5-minute break, and then we'll have panel where you can have your questions and so on. We have discussion about what we did and what the future plays for us. And I'll give Richard some time to summarize what we did today. All right? With that protocol, I invite my friend, Arjun Daryanani. Will you kindly welcome Arjun Daryanani?
Thank you, Mr. Mishra. You've been so kind.
Kindly all sit down, please. Can you? Can you all settle down, please? Can you all settle down, please? Can you all settle down, please? Can you? Okay.
This whole thing is very impromptu. I didn't make any plans or any real idea what I was going to say, but I'm going to talk about how life was in Sindh. And as Mr. just mentioned, is how self-sufficient the Sindhis are. And I'm a Sindhi. I was born in Sindh, and but had to leave Sindh due to partition, and ended up in India, and then from India I'm here, whatever. So that has nothing to do, but I'm going to talk about life in Sindh as I know it, as I grew up there, but it was limited growth, only 12 years, because I'm an ancient man, 60 plus 25, and it's about life in Sindh. Now, Sindh comprised of about three prominent communities. In the north, there were the Shikarpuris, who were the farmers, and there were loan sharks also amongst them, and they had a lot of agriculture. And in the center of Sindh was Hyderabad, which was the financial district, and I'll come to that later. And then, of course, in the south was Karachi, which was the biggest seaport. And as earlier somebody was asking about Mesopotamia, well, it was marine way of getting there too. Now, Hyderabad Sindh was a very dominant place. In what sense? That the Sindhis of Hyderabad mainly, well, let me first put it this way. There were three communities, one Shikarpuri, then we had the Baibans, and then we had the Amals. The Amals were the educated people who did all kind of professional jobs. They were in government jobs, they were headmasters, they were teachers, they were doctors, they were lawyers, and all this and that. Then there were the Baibans, of which community I am a part, were the traders. And we, like Mr. Misra just mentioned, we knew how to make big from a small one. So we ended up opening businesses all over the world. And there is no port, there is no major city in India where you won't find a Sindhi. Okay, they are all businessmen, and I'm one of them. Okay, so anyway, the life that we lived there was pretty good because earlier somebody said about economy, how we maintain economy. Of course, I'm moving into modern times, not ancient times, which is like going from 1890 to 1945. Because after 45, it was partition of India. Sindh became another story, which we don't know anything about, because Sindh predominantly, I've been moving from this area to that area. Sindh predominantly was 20% Hindus and 80% Muslims. It was about 8 million population. So 2 million were Sindhis and 6 million were Muslims. Because those Muslims were original Hindus converted by the invasion of the Muslims from the north, wherever they came from. So we controlled the financial part of Sindh from Hyderabad because we were the businessmen who ran businesses overseas, and we brought money into the country, foreign exchange, through those overseas businesses. So that maintained the economy of Sindh. Plus, Sindh was a very highly agricultural province due to the growth of all kinds of grains, which I believe were used economically for home use. Plus, I'm sure they send them to all over India because they produce some excellent quality agriculture product due to the fertile land we had from the Indus River. And I just found out from Dr. Dudhani that the Indus River originates from Lake Mansarovar. And of course, Lake Mansarovar has been, must be fed from the Himalayas. So the Indus is part of the Himalayas, the water. And it's always been fertile. Then there was a question of language. And as Dr. Dudhani mentioned, that's another thing I learned today, that it was made out of 40% Sanskrit, 6% Parsi which is Persian and Arabic, and then the rest was especially Sindhi, which is very difficult to pronounce, like ge, nge, be, all these are difficult. I mean, people can pronounce it, but not in that connotation unless you are born with it. So if your child grew up in that fashion, then they can do that. And then the living style was, we didn't have any proper drainage in Hyderabad, as far as I know, because I only lived in Hyderabad. And we did not have any proper clean water. We had plenty of water, but we had to filter it ourselves. So what they used in most houses was to get these ceramic kind of candles, and they made water drip through that into a matka, you know, that earthen bowl, and then we used potassium permanganate to kill the bacteria. And that was the life in Sindh. Okay. Well, I guess that gives you a gist of modern Sindh against the ancient civilization. And it's all, of course, related to Mohenjo-daro and Harappa and the Indus River Valley.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
So I think half people have gone away, which is good though, because the reason I did the whole day thing to see how many people really wish to discover India. And so that was my own experiment, that this is not hand-waving operation. This is not like we liked our country operation. This is a very deep culture. And again, I think for us who are enthusiastic about it, this is a living culture. No other culture in the world can suggest it. Whatever happened 7,000 years ago might be happening now. The same bullock cart, the same design, it continues. This fabric we alluded in this people's talks and so on, and this design could be from that period. The checkered cotton we see in Sindh, most likely by color, might have come from them. The question that we have in mind is that this examination of us by people of Indian descent has not happened. Why we are doing this? Because we are stuck with this. We are in the United States. we are lucky that the local community allows us to probe. They admire if you have an identity. They appreciate if you say with your personality. They appreciate if you have heritage. And that heritage is not anything that this country has seen before. So each of us, we bring a trail of heritage. And what you saw is only a very surface part of it. Very small surface. As a big rock inside of it. But now we have people, I have requested them to be together, and 2 of them are not here, they have left, but we have 4 of our speakers. We have Richard. Now, when I'm saying this, would you kindly applaud my friend Richard Meadow? Who unhesitatingly accepted my invitation when I asked him, because I was defensive. What is this? Why should we explore? Why shall I spend my day with a group of people who may not know what they're talking about? I'm a scholar, I'm an academic. I dig things. So then we had to prepare ourselves to see that whether we can come on par. And people really worked hard. Will you please applaud the 6 presenters who joined out of blue. They had no clue in January what they're getting into. They knew the phrase, and people will ask, they will come back to ask, what does it mean? Am I supposed to do it? I said, try it. But when I said try it, they would not know what that trial meant. So to have that individual spirit inside of them, and then to let it grow, and that they have come up with the presentation that we show. That is the Indian heritage. That is, people can really come up to some challenges if there is a need, if there is an intellectual appreciation. What we'll do now in this part of the program is see, also can you show that silk? So this is just silk cap. I think eventually in the so-called the India Discovery Center that we're doing, where we plan to promote this kind of material from the local folks all over the subcontinent to see how people lived and whether we can make it be appreciated elsewhere in the globe. And there are many other things, artifacts, specimens, signatures, folk items, cultural artifacts. So we will kind of try to make a good summary of it and see if we can really articulate as cleanly, as eloquently as the design, the meticulousness, the cultural traits that they represent. That's a long process. Okay, all right. So,
just want to add something. The way we got here is through
No,
Dr. Mishra's mentorship.
Okay, all right. So now I think people who are here, if you want to volunteer for our cause, so there'll be a form there in that table. So you might sign up, and please do. And if you want to help us financially, you can do. We have different kind of needs. And I will come to that after this panel is over. So let us now hear from Richard about what he heard, how many errors we did, and how to we improve, and whether this path of preparing people, observing themselves experimentally, as a scientist, as an academic, I want to hear from him that how much of academic progress we made by virtue of this volunteer scholarship in religion. I call it volunteer scholarship.
I have one here.
Okay, on it.
Thank you very much. This is a difficult thing you've asked me to do. I'll do my best. I was impressed with every single presentation. I think that each of you who took on your task did so with a great deal of dedication and enthusiasm for what you did. I think also that each of you took on a very difficult task. Because, in fact, I don't know, presumably many of your resources were from online, and online material is extremely difficult to evaluate. And my source of information is basically from scholarship and from basically a large number of people that I know who do the same similar sort of thing that I do. And that's the nature of academia, and often academia does not talk enough to people like you who have a great interest in this. So I'm very, very happy to be here with you today because I think it's been extremely valuable for me as well.
Okay.
If any of you want to follow up on any aspect of anything that you've talked about today, I'm pleased to give you my card, and please feel free to email me, and I'll be glad to send you references from the scholarly literature, which if you can't get yourselves, I can download the PDF and send it to you because I have access to my university to all that material. There is one book which I would recommend, which I can send you, which I think is very valuable for your sort of thing and what have you, is a massive study done by a student from the University of Wisconsin who got his degree about 5 years ago, who did a complete study of sources of stone and rock material in northwestern South Asia, and then analyzed hundreds and hundreds of specimens of both the modern source material and archaeological material to try to source where this material came from. He wrote a 700-page dissertation, which includes all his data, and it's available as a PDF. And for those of you who are interested in, and also he talks extensively about trade routes and movement of materials both into the Indus and out of the Indus area. This is probably the most important work that's been done on the Indus civilization as far as interaction is concerned that's ever been done, period. And in fact, he has done something which in Mesopotamia they've been working on this for 50 years. He did it in 5 years.
Wow.
For the Indus area.
What's the name?
His name is Randall Law. And he basically made contact with people both in India and in Pakistan and went to these source areas, and it was just before Pakistan became very dangerous. So he actually managed to get into areas which you could not get into today.
Wow.
And he worked with the local geologists both in India and in Pakistan, and what he couldn't get, they got for him. So he has done a fabulous work which really completely changes our understanding of the way that people interacted with each other. And those of you, and I know some of you did, and especially in the last talk of yours, where you emphasized interaction across this area, I think that's one of the key issues we can see here. And also the question of the structure of the Indus civilization and the relationships between settlements and the relationships between people within settlements is also one of the most important questions which we have and which is most difficult to answer without a writing system. Because if you think about all the other major civilizations that we know about, everything we know about their structure is based on the writing system. Written. As a result, of course, it's biased to the things which people who wrote. And archaeology has a great contribution to make even in places where you have writing because it produces a different sort of information. But we're left with archaeology to figure out what was going on here. So I think that one issue that's come up is the question of continuity between the ancient times and now. I think that's a topic which you can people have beliefs on, but the evidence is much more difficult to deal with. So I think that's something that you should probably think about for all your future your meetings, basically, the question of continuity, and how you actually think about continuity, and how you can actually document continuity, and how much is what you think about continuity is your belief, or is how much is actually based on evidence. And if it's based on evidence, it's based on written evidence, who's doing the writing and who's not doing the writing. History is often written by those who basically are rich and successful, basically. It's not necessarily done by those who are poor and unsuccessful.
Yeah.
And that's, in Mesopotamia they have something which they call onionology. Onionology is basically the study of the ancient text, the economic text, which deal a lot with onions in Mesopotamia, basically. And so from that you can get a different picture than if you just read the text of the kings who had somebody write their histories according to the way they want to look at it. So it's important to do onionology as well as it is to do political history. Another thing which Swati brought up basically was the question of millets. I think the question of millets is a very interesting question. In fact, in Gujarat, they have wild millets which were domesticated locally during this period. And this is something else which has been underestimated. People have talked about wheat and barley and rice. Okay, wheat and barley came from the West. Rice may or may not have been domesticated in India. It's not clear. It's still a big debate among the specialists who deal with this. There certainly are many different types of wild rices even today in India. To what degree these were actually domesticated, or to what degree was it necessary to interbreed them with East Asian rice to get modern rice is another question which is still being debated. But rice is a really interesting question as well. But millets you had all over India, South India, West India, North India, and now today I heard a lecture 3 weeks ago talking about the new Neolithic sites which have been found in Orissa, and basically that in Orissa there are something like more than 20 different forms of different wild rices still today. And they're starting to do the analyses to find out to what degree these may have contributed to Indian domestic rice. So there's all sorts of new frontiers taking place across India, not only in the Indus area, but all over India, as more and more people are working on these issues. And the impetus for these issues has come largely, has been possible to develop primarily because of the contributions of the IT industry, basically. The abilities to manage very large databases and to actually organize your material in a way that you can actually retrieve it, and to manipulate it in different ways, to run statistical tests on it, to evaluate things using different statistical approaches, and that sort of thing is something which has really transformed archaeology today, and has made it very different than when I started many years ago in the field. And I don't think we could nearly do what we do today without the results of what the IT industry has provided for us. It has also provided us with the abilities to manipulate data from ancillary approaches to the study of materials. So a lot of work which is being done today for example, in genetics is based completely on the ability of increasingly sophisticated IT and modeling approaches, modeling approaches are becoming very important in archaeology today also. And more especially younger people who become comfortable with with IT techniques and what have you, are doing a lot of modeling now, which is very, very useful for developing hypotheses and for which can be tested in the archaeological record. So all of this sort of things have made a sea change in the way that archaeology is practiced today. And what you've been looking at basically is material which comes out of more traditional archaeology, which is actually also has to be joined with the new approaches in order to make a complete picture. And so archaeologists now specialize in many different ways. My thing, which I specialize mostly on, is the study of animal bones from archaeological sites. And in order to do this properly, I have to know about the archaeology, I have to know about all that sort of stuff. I have to know about genetics, I have to know about statistics, I have to know about all this range of material, and I have to keep retraining myself all the time in order to deal with this sort of material. But when you start getting into this material, like for example, human genetics and ancient human genetics, and even in animal genetics, and all sorts of things which come down to raising questions about people's ancestry and what have you, you have to think about the fact that your biology is a necessary part of your brain functioning, because it creates your brain, and it creates a lineage for your brain. But your brain basically works on the basis of the culture in which it was brought up in, and basically it's not linked directly to your genetics, and therefore you cannot equate a genetic signature with a linguistic signature, or with beliefs, or with anything else like that. Basically, anything which is cultural does not necessarily relate to genetics at all. Okay, and so what you've done here today is to talk about culture, and talk about the evidence which we have in archaeology for the culture. This is not to say that the new approaches like genetic approaches can't be interesting and helpful.
Yeah.
Because I think we're going to learn as we do this that never was there any population that was isolated for any period of time from any other population. The only thing isolated was distance, but people moved over vast distances, even deep in the past. And as a result, their genes spread, but those genes, basically, the people who came out of the end of the reproductive process, lived within a cultural belief.
Right.
And I think that's something which can't be overestimated, overemphasized as far as our understanding is. As more and more people talk about ancient genetics and the meaning of modern genetics and what have you, I think that's also something very important to emphasize. So I really value the presentations that were made today because of your efforts to deal with this cultural aspect of the Indus area, which is only one small portion of South Asia. Okay? And it just happens to be the one that was the first urbanization and where you had the earliest agriculture and what have you. But that's what also makes South Asia very interesting, is because other parts of the subcontinent, things went differently on a different time frame, and there were different cultural things which developed in those particular areas which are equally valuable. And then you had people who interacted with each other. You had the rise of empires and what have you, with some people basically taking over other areas and subjugating other people, and so it's part of history.
Right.
But that part of history basically makes us all, whether it be in the United States or in India today, what we are today. We can't basically disown our history. We have to learn how to live with our history, and then basically use our history in a way which is the most productive possible as far as getting along with everybody else, and basically having a valuable and an economy which basically is inclusive of everyone.
Good.
Okay, that's my philosophy.
All right.
Can I ask you a question?
Well, once
Being
again.
a person who has done a lot with big data in archaeology, who would you attribute to do that? I'm sorry.
Microphone?
Sure.
She was asking if I could give her names of people who have done big data work in archaeology. Yes, I can give you some names, basically. They're not necessarily in the Indus area, but they're in other archaeology of other parts of the world.
I just want to respond to Richard. Our plans. Our plans is again, as I said, we're very modest, and the task is large. So what we have been thinking, or we have thought of doing, is we'll have 8 different such seminars. So we started today, and January 21st, we're thinking of our next seminar, which should be the Vedic seminar. The Vedic seminar, Vedic think period, somewhere around the 2000 BC until about 700 BC. And material there, even though it is later, but it is not really, again, as organized, because very little archaeological evidence exists. So there are philological or literature evidence, or some mythology evidence. So anyway, so we have lined up 6 people, and one of them is here today, Professor Rahul Ray, is sitting there. And then anybody else is, other people are not here today, but so they will be doing the research on that. And then again, the next year, July, we'll have the following period, which is the Buddhist period, or Buddhist Jain. So again, we'll do the same process. So then again, 6 months later, what we call the Indian Gupta period, or early Hindu, where the literature will come. And again, we have not fully measured what exactly things would be, but these 6 tracks that we said, geography and people, art and culture, language and literature, philosophy and religion, science and technology, and economy and politics. So those would be our to see. So early Hindu, and then we'll go to the late Hindu. Late Hindu, where the temples are built and so on, languages come, and India has a much different flavor in the world. Economy is high. And then we go to Islam, the Mughal period. And after Mughal period, we go to the British period. And then British period, we come to the current period, what we are. So through this particular process, hopefully we can discover ourselves. As I said in the beginning, that somewhere in this pipeline, India discovered that man is a peaceful animal. Man is a joyful animal. Man likes tranquility. The man is literate. Man is a magician. Valmiki said man is a poet. And when you walk around and so on, you see nature has poetry, rhythm, harmony. There's a sense of togetherness. And the claim is India discovered it, and that's the manliness. But then it doesn't seem that way. It doesn't seem that way because we seem to be selfish, just like anybody else, ownership. And we have been told that these things have been taught to us to be scary, to be afraid of. So we can see what exactly happened. But the champion, I was reading Thoreau yesterday night just to understand. Thoreau was a man, like I read Emerson this morning. Thoreau was a man who lived also somewhere close by. And he declared, the man is free. So when America says the man, freedom is there. So whether we are free, we're poets in us, that's the discovery. So anyway, so that's where the India Discovery Center will go. If you people, anybody wants to join the team in any particular manner, please write your name. And August 6th, we have a volunteers meeting. And every 2 weeks we meet. So let me know. And at the present time, what we'll do is, each of you is free to comment and have a question to people. And then anything that you want to add. And somebody here, very senior, who had originally blessed our organization by saying that, yes, move ahead. Let me invite him. He will speak a few words to you on behalf of India Discovery Center and what India is all about. Invite 90-year-old. 90-year-old Mr. Mulraz Mathur.
So we have only 10 more minutes.
Yeah, actually,
Yeah.
wrap up everything.
Right. So you have 3 minutes.
Oh, yeah. I'll get there. Hello, let me checking. Hello? Yeah. Hello. Yeah. Oh, I'm very much privileged because I came to know about this Indus civilization only very shortly. I've been so busy. Vijay Mishra mentioned to me only a few days back, anyhow. But the point is this, that I'm really delighted to see, and I'm very happy to hear Mr. Miller's account and all his comments, very nice indeed. And in the same addition, I would say that really, basically, fundamentally, we are all looking for peace of mind, As an Aryan race, the Aryan race has from the inception, thousands of years back, so some strain went in Europe, some strain went in towards the east, some towards India. And some of the strain that came to India settled down, and as a result of them, they were always quest. There was an eternal quest for answers to so many problems: material problem, physical problem, mental problems, emotional problems. And for that, the human beings, and I agree with Vijay Mishra really, that people try to find out the answers, and they developed technology. And for that, in India also we have, coming back to technology, we have some remarkable, amazing phenomena of working in metallurgy. I happen to be a metallurgist and a chemist. So therefore, I was delighted to see University of Cincinnati. They have a 2-foot model of the iron pillar of Delhi, and where they are trying to find out what the composition was. And it happened that about copper, zinc, gold, and silver, and iron. The Indians did develop a lot of technology, particularly Indian Indus Valley civilization, and as a result, when Lord Ashoka won the wars, he wanted to build pillars, the pillars of victory pillars, and one of the pillars is in Delhi. And I must comment on that because I went to see him, find out after being in Cincinnati, where I did my postgraduate work, that it's an amazing phenomena of process technology, how iron has been converted and is there without rusting. Composition-wise controlled 97%, 3% carbon and trace elements, and a little bit porosity. And with that porosity standing right for hundreds of years without rusting. So it's an amazing metallurgical phenomena. And in Cincinnati they have written, the real chemical process technology answers have not been found yet, even after 100 years. So this goes to show the technology was there in Mohenjo-daro and Harappa at that time. But unfortunately, because of climate, because of the political reasons, all that knowledge was lost. And finally, we are still trying to find out again. So all I'm trying to say is this: human mentality has been the quest for search, the search for all technology and all the requirements of human beings that we have. And for that, we have religions, we had engineers, engineering, and at every step, the man is not easygoing, is restless. There are always the eternal search of mankind will always be there, and we are seeing the result, satellites and all the missiles and everything. Thank you very much.
If any of you wish to comment, you can do so on your regarding. So your little toys, can you show your little toys?
I'm sorry, I picked up, they're the replicas. Anyway, regarding continuity, there's a musical percussion instrument called billow. You saw the slide of that. It is still used in any Sindhi musical function, whether in India or in Pakistan, in Sindh. And it's called dillo or a matka. And they use it in Andhra and Telangana also, but they use it upside down. And we used to, in Sydney, use it upright. And then there is a borindo, just like the size of a golf ball, which shepherds use, and discovered that excavated and moved to the road. The shepherds in India, in the northern regions of Sindh, they still use it, gathering their cattle. It's called borindo. And then you saw the replica of the bullock cart with a solid wooden wheel. It was till 1935 in Larkana, which is 25 my birthplace. Main transport for the goods in the district town of Larkana was still bullock cart with a solid wooden wheel, screeching like hell all over the town. So I think that the continuity of the Mohenjo-daro is still there. Thank you.
Anybody else have any quick comment?
Can I just do a mini comment? So what I said, I was actually, during the session, I tried to raise an issue, or not issue, it's a comment actually. The comment is that my question actually asked that I talked about the Minoan civilization in Crete, it died, and so in Mohenjo-daro and Harappa civilization, it died also. My question is that, was it a natural death? Because all evidences support that it's natural death. So that relates to what's happening today, in the sense that what we're seeing today in the whole world, as a matter of fact. Is it going to die down by itself? That's what I'm saying. It's a humorous comment.
We don't really know what happened at the end of the Indus civilization. That's one of the big open questions.
Yes.
Because of the nature of what's been excavated so far, and because much of the later material is probably underneath modern settlements, therefore not accessible. So it is a big issue, so I'm afraid I can't answer that question.
And even related today.
I take one more question and then we have to vacate the room.
I saw a lot of information on trade, and you're saying Kolar mines is where you got the gold. So what was going on in the rest of Asia while, I always thought that Indus is the oldest, but obviously there's other civilizations that were digging minerals out and doing stuff. So I was just curious about that, if you had any take on what was happening around India.
Well, the Indus phenomenon, if you date it at 2600, basically, that's as far as an urban civilization is concerned. That's many centuries later than what was going on in Mesopotamia, and which started in the 4th millennium. And it's basically a little later than what was going on in Egypt, and it's earlier than what was going on in China. So basically, every area had its own route to basically urban, if you want to call it civilization. And they all basically did very much similar sort of things about capping resources, using trade, what have you. I think the particulars are different in each case, but generally speaking, they were on a similar trajectory all around. And the big question for the Indus, because there is no writing that we can read, is basically what the structure of this society was. I mean, some people believe they were city-states basically, but remember, you only have 5 to 7 large urban settlements. You have thousands of village settlements. Okay, so it's not really a world of cities. It's a world of villages with a few cities, and I think that's something that we need to emphasize. And really, most of what we know comes from cities. But there's one little site down just outside of Karachi by the name of Aladino, which was excavated by Walter Fair Service many years ago. And in that, he found, in the last season, they left it there for 2 or 3 seasons because they didn't want to dig it out. They found a vessel which was complete, buried in the ground. When they dug the vessel out and saw what was inside, it was full of basic precious metals and jewelry and what have you, of a quality which we found in any urban center. And this was a little bitty little site which may have had a population of 150 people. Okay? So, I mean, that is something which is quite, and you find this at many Indus sites, is even the tiny ones have, remarkable material in them. And that's something which is really quite different than in many other areas. So, and the other thing is that Indus people did not bury much riches with their dead. They didn't alienate their wealth. As in India today, they pass it on to the next generation, or they cash it in.
All right, what I've done is I've created I've done this Indus seminar Google group, and people who have registered, they're members of it. So if you want to be a member of it, you can Indus seminar, IDC Indus seminar Google group. So do write. I will ask Richard also if you want to be part of it.
Just send me the information.
And then when the questions you can put there and have interactive discussion. Now we have to really physically close this so now. I want to thank few people. One is not here, but who helped us print the brochure. Will you please applaud Chandu Sa? People helped me with the registration. Darshan Dubey standing there, and all right. And then I think I have my special thanks to this gentleman, whom I have known for 35 years and so on. He is a teacher, local teacher, videographer, and he kindly consented to come and do the job, Mr. Leo Rissel. So all of you, to my grateful thanks, because you see, I didn't expect that people will really encourage us, but we feel blessed that you are here even in this late afternoon. And again, with blessings to the company, to the India, and to the academic community, and to the research. So let us close this so, and let us again finally thank all the speakers and the audience.
And lastly, I think we thank Lexington Community Center staff for helping us to conduct this show. We really appreciate their help. And the audience. Without you, there is no show. Thank you.
Now what do we have here?
This is a bullock cart replica. I'll get the beans.
This is a replica of a seal.
A seal.
You have another? Seal representing this guy.
These are the bullock carts.
Very good. So these are